Hello everyone, and welcome to Think Outside the Board. If you've been here before, then welcome back. This is the August Game of the Month video. Now, how I generally work these videos is I talk about sort of 3 different categories of games. There is the Remake category, which is essentially for games that are having a later version done. So it's not necessarily a second printing, it's a whole new version. I also have a category for games that are a little bit older. They don't have to be super old, they just have to not be games that are recently released. So I kind of set a date of 6 months. The games need to be 6 months or older to qualify. And then I also talk about my favorite new game, meaning a game that is sort of just fresh off the presses. It's been released within the last 6 months. Today's going to be a shorter video because I don't have any runners up in the various categories. So if I'm playing a lot of games, I may end up doing a game and up to 2 runners up in each category. So, some months I'll have a game and a runner up in each category. Some months I may not have a game in one category, but I might have kind of a winner in one category and 2 runners up. So it's variable, and I usually end up talking about 3 to 6 games each month. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about 1 game in each of those categories. And as you can see, I tend to kind of highlight the new game of the month. And the new game of the month for August is Imperium Classics. I haven't played Imperium Legends yet, but I think it's safe to say that that game is also included. They're basically the same game. They're designed by the same designers. They've also both got art by the Miko. It's essentially the same game. They're just different factions in each of the boxes. And Classics is sort of designed to be the more intro level game. It has some easier factions, whereas Legends has more of the complicated factions. So as the new game of the month, and in general, kind of the overall game of the month, Imperium Classics is just going to sit here throughout the video so you can look at it and admire it. It's a really good game. I'll talk about this after I talk about the other 2 games. So the first game that I'm going to talk about in this video is the older game, and that is going to be Flotilla. Now, I think Flotilla is probably my favorite game of 2019. I haven't gone back to 2019 and kind of looked at everything that I played that released that year and rated them all and kind of listed them in comparison to each other. But I remember thinking that Flotilla was my game of the year for 2019. I actually didn't play it until 2020. I played it at Dice Tower West in 2020, which was, I think, either late February or maybe early March. But I really, really loved this game. And I liked it so much I picked up a copy shortly after Dice Tower West, but then the global pandemic hit. And this is a game that does not have a 2-player mode. And so for most of the pandemic, I was just playing games with my fiancée, Kristen. And so it wasn't until a couple months ago that I was able to finally get this played with some of my other friends who, like heavier games. And, it's just within the last few months that we've been starting to meet again, just 3 of us, and playing games. Now, there are so many reasons to like Flotilla. It's a collection of mechanisms that I really, really enjoy to begin with. There is deck building in the game, and it's kind of like Concordia, where you're going to start with a hand of cards, and each time you play one of those cards, you put it down, you sort of take that action, and then you'll have another card. In this game, it's called the Captain, and when you play that card, you'll be able to retrieve all of the cards that you've played previously and get 1 money for each card. So as far as that goes, that kind of action with the Captain, you're incentivized to play as many cards as you can, and then when you play that Captain, you'll have a more powerful action, because if you're picking up a lot of cards, you'll be getting a lot of money. If you were only to play like 1 or 2 cards and then do the pickup action, you would essentially be wasting that pickup action. That would be your action for the turn, and you wouldn't really get very much of it. So that's kind of a move that you don't want to do unless you have 1 or 2 cards that you're specifically wanting to play a lot, and so you have them in heavy rotation. But that mechanic plays very much the way it does in Concordia, and I love Concordia. I think Concordia is a fantastic game that sits in this little kind of Venn diagram overlap where most players can really enjoy it. I think it's light enough that lighter players can understand it and enjoy it, but it still has enough kind of complex, heavy choices that heavier gamers like it as well. And I think it sits in that middle, in this great little space where most gamers can really enjoy Concordia, I think. Flotilla is definitely a heavier game. So you've got that deck building mechanic. There's also kind of this larger mechanic in Flotilla where when you start playing the game, you're going to be seaside. And then anytime you use that captain to sort of pick up your hand of cards, you can choose to go skyside, which has you turning in tiles and cards that you've been using and resources. And you'll then play with an entirely different set of mechanics than you did in the first half of the game when you were playing seaside. The really cool thing here is that when players make that decision to go skyside and they kind of flip everything around that they're doing, those new mechanics that they're playing with really benefit the economic system in place for the players that are still seaside. So actions that players are taking start to benefit each other. So much so that I think if you get fairly far into the game and no players have gone skyside, it may kind of hamper the gameplay. So again, players are kind of incentivized to make that switch. However, once a few players do that, there is still this kind of incentivization for some players to stay seaside because those two economic systems play off each other so well. So if you're the last player who's still kind of on that seaside game after everyone else has switched over to skyside, you're probably going to want to stay seaside because you're going to be getting so many benefits from all of the other players that are skyside. And I think that's just a really, really interesting dynamic, this kind of seesaw, teeter-totter thing, where early on you may want to kind of go over there and do that, and then as the game goes on and more players do that, you may kind of want to stay behind. Now, the reason that that kind of balance exists, part of it is the economic system that I'll talk about in just a second, but the other part of it are bonus tiles, which score a lot of points. And so there are certain bonus tiles set aside for seaside and certain bonus tiles set aside for skyside. But you can only collect the bonus tiles for the area that you're in. And the amount that those tiles score decrease the more the players take those same tiles. So in the beginning, players that are seaside are going to be having some kind of a race to fulfill the requirements for those seaside bonus tiles. They're going to be in competition for them, and they're going to be competing, and they really want those kind of high points. But once players have taken some of those, and the only tiles left are the lower scoring points, players will start to look at those bonus tiles for the skyside half of the game, and they'll start to look more and more enticing because they're going to have a lot of points attached to them. Players will be incentivized to make that switch to try to scoop up some of those big scoring skyside tiles before other players have a chance to get there. Now, the individual mechanics kind of work like this. So when you start the game and you're seaside, you're going to have these little ships. You're going to have to pay to bring out the ships. You're going to need to get a little money going. But once you do, you're going to take these ships and you're going to be sailing them around these sea tiles that you are drawing from a bag and kind of placing. And you'll be able to take these little skiffs out into the ocean and then dive for resources. And you'll get different colored barrels depending on how you roll and what kind of colored tile that you're on. And then these barrels can be sold for money. Now, there is a movable market. So the more you sell those barrels, the more the price that they sell for is going to go down. But if you have a player that goes skyside, they no longer have a way to get those barrels, but they're going to need barrels to score certain tiles that they have on their side. So they're going to need to be buying barrels. And the more they buy barrels, the more the price of the barrels will be driven back up, which means the players that are still seaside will then be able to sell barrels again for a very good price. There are a lot of other mechanics going on here. There are 4 different kind of sub-factions within the cards, and players are going to be able to kind of go around a little faction track, and as they do that, they're going to be able to recruit more and more powerful cards into that deck-building hand that they have going. And there's several other mechanical systems in the game as well. I probably don't need to get into all of them right now, but they all combine to give you a lot of different choices, and those mechanical systems play off each other really well. And again, there's that really nice kind of seesaw balance between the two sides of the game. Now, I don't think I've ever played another game where you can do that, where you're kind of playing by one set of mechanical systems, And then at any point in the game, you can choose to kind of trade in all your resources, all your tiles, and operate with a completely different set of mechanical systems. It's just a very fascinating game design for me overall. And I like both sides of the game. And I also like trying to decide when is the right moment in a given game to make that switch. I mean, it really depends on what you're doing, what other players are doing, what the goal cards are, and how they relate to kind of what you have going on, both for the sea side and for the sky side. And it's a really great combination of mechanics. You've got dice building, you've got pick up and deliver, you've got tile placement, you've got some faction tracks, you've got some dice rolling and dice mitigation, and there are just a lot of opportunities for you to kind of customize what you're doing, build your deck, kind of build your player powers, and how you're using and chaining your cards together. It's a great game. I don't plan on doing a first impressions video for this anytime soon because it's not a new game. But at some point, I'd probably really like to do a full teaching review because this is a game that I just absolutely love. For me right now, the game is just so fun to play. It's really compellingly fun. And so I probably rate it around a 9.5 or a 10. Now, I need to play it more because once I get a dozen plays in, I'll be a better judge if there's kind of cracks in the mechanical systems and how long the game can really go before starting to kind of wear thin. But after a few plays, I see no signs of crackage. And I love everything about the game. I love all of its systems. I love all of the choices in it. And it's a game that I would really strongly recommend to heavier gamers. My two caveats for it are that you can't play it with less than 3 players. So there's no solo game, and there's not even a 2-player variant. And the designers have kind of gone on board to say, we're not going to try to make a 2-player variant for it. It just wouldn't work very well. And I applaud them for that. There's a lot of games out there that put a 2-player variant or just kind of a 2-player version of the game that doesn't really work very well. And I think as much as we as gamers would really like all games to be able to be played at a 2-player count or even have a solo version, not all games are going to be able to do that. There are just a lot of games that aren't going to be able to be kind of smushed into that box, if the design doesn't really work in that way. And I applaud them for being honest and, not trying to sell more games with a 2-player version that doesn't really play very well. Now, there is a 2-player game set in this universe. It's called Seastead. It is an exclusively 2-player game. It's a kind of head-to-head game, but the mechanics are very different. So you may like one game and you may like the other, but it is not a 2-player version of Flotilla, even though it is set in that kind of same universe. It has different designers, the mechanics are different. So don't love Flotilla and then go buy Seastead thinking that you're also going to like that because it's just a 2-player variant. It's not. And for my money, Seastead's okay. It's nowhere near as good a game as Flotilla. So anyway, for the month of August, Flotilla is going to be the older game of the month. That brings me to essentially the remake of the month. And that means a game that has already existed before in some format. So it's a reskin or a redesign. It's not just a second printing, because when games sell out, they need to make a second printing. But when they do that, it is really just the same version of the game. So it's a new version of a game that has already existed. Now, interestingly enough, in the July Game of the Month video, my remake of the month was for Chronicles of Crime 1400, and in this August Game of the Month, it's going to be for Chronicles of Crime 1900. Now, both of those games are very similar, and both of them are newer versions of the original Chronicles of Crime game. I still have not played the original Chronicles of Crime game. I hear that that game is actually a little bit tougher because some of the cases maybe aren't as well written, and so it can be a little harder to kind of figure things out. I've played all of Chronicles of Crime 1400 now. I think all of the cases in that game are very well written, and the solutions make sense and they're logical. They do get harder as the game goes on, which I think is, what we want. It's to be desired. You want to be able to have an easier tutorial scenario, and then you want to have the final case in a game like this, I think, be more of a challenge, and then you can kind of ramp up to that as you play the game. So that is true of both 1400 and 1900. Now, when I talked about 1400 last month, I talked about a mechanic in the game called vision cards. So there are these cards that you get for every case. It's somewhere between maybe 3 and 6 cards, and they have images on them that relate to the case. So they literally represent visions that you've had about the case, and there will be images on these cards of people and interactions and objects that are from the case. And so in 1400, as you're playing that game, you'll be looking at these vision cards and you'll have an idea of, have I kind of explored all of the case? Do I know how all of these things kind of make sense to each other? And once you figure that out, once you kind of can tell the story looking at those vision cards, you'll have a good idea if you're ready to solve the case. I think that's a very, very good way to begin the series. And so I would really recommend Chronicles of Crime 1400 for anyone new to the Chronicles of Crime series. In 1900, though, they take that mechanic away and they replace it with some puzzle cards. So you'll need to find several different cards within your search, and then when you put them together in different ways, it'll give you a puzzle that you need to try to figure out. It reminds me a lot of an unlock game or an exit game. And to me, I think I prefer that because it just makes the game a little more interactive. It gives you something to do that's a little bit different from the other puzzles and the style of gameplay in these games. So in all of the Chronicles of Crime games, this one included, they play with app-dependent technology. So you will need something that can connect to the internet. Your phone is ideal because you need something that also has a camera on it. This game is very much designed around QR codes. Now there's QR codes on location boards in the game and also on 3 different kinds of cards. So as you're walking around a city, you will talk to people, you'll explore locations, and to do that, every time you're going to scan a QR code, and it'll give you on your phone a story and some choices that you can make. You can interview people and ask them about other people and objects and kind of information that's in the case. And the game will kind of function almost like an adventure game, like the old King's Quest games, or all of the Infocom text adventures, or all of the Lucasfilm games like Day of the Tentacle, Maniac Mansion, and the Monkey Island games. You are walking around a town, you're investigating, you're talking to people, and you're trying to solve some kind of crime. Usually it's a murder, but not always. Sometimes it could be theft, and sometimes in the more complicated cases, there'll be multiple crimes that kind of happen as you're investigating, and some of that complexity comes in linking the cases together or, kind of figuring out which evidence goes with which case. Another game that I think it bears a lot in common with is the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective series. But those games were made before app technology and, cell phone cameras. And so they just had booklets that came with the game. And as you were trying to solve the cases, everything that you would do would refer to text on booklets and kind of physical pages. And so you were doing research with physical items. This game reformats that for cellular technology. And I like it. I think that the app is really interactive. And I like that it takes a lot of those research systems that you need to involve yourself with and puts it within, a small amount of technology. You don't have to deal with all of these booklets and maps and kind of atlases and things that you're kind of flipping around. It kind of curates that experience through app technology. I think it does a fantastic job of it. Now, I am 2 cases into 1900. All of the games in the series, I believe, have 5 cases. So there's a tutorial, an easy case, 2 medium cases, and a hard case. And 1400 felt kind of like an Assassin's Creed game, whereas 1900 is set more in Victorian England. Now, the art for the entire series is fantastic, just top-notch. Very thematic and, drawn in such a way that it really captures the time. There's a 3rd game in the series that I'll be playing next. It's Chronicles of Crime 2400, and that one obviously is set in the future. It's got kind of a cyberpunk feel to it, and I'm really looking forward to that game as well. I have a feeling that's going to be my favorite one in the series. But for now, it's 1900. I'm just loving the art, and I'm loving the experience of exploring that world and solving cases in in London in 1900. Now, there's also kind of a through line between all these games. You're playing different characters in the same crime-solving family. And there's also going to be a fourth game in the series. I think it's called Chronicles of Time, and it's going to kind of bounce around and use all three of the previous games. If you happen to back it on Kickstarter like I did, you might have gotten this larger box which holds all four of the other games. And so they shipped all the components out when the Kickstarter delivered, but they've been kind of catching up with the app side and the design side, and they've kind of been releasing them one at a time as time has gone on. Now, it's a great series. High recommend for me. Now, the only caveat that I should mention about this game and this series in general is that it's kind of a one-off. So as you're playing the cases, there are set answers. Everything is scripted. It's not randomized, which means that as you solve the case, you are going to know the answers and you won't be able to play it again. It's possible maybe you could kind of put it away in a closet and come back to it several years, and if you didn't remember it, you might be able to have an experience with it again. But in a short-term setting, you will know the answers to the cases, and there won't really be a way for you to replay it after you've figured everything out. Now, that means that the early cases, the tutorial and maybe the easy case, you may only need a play to really completely solve it and 100% it. But the later cases, like the hard one, the hardest case in the series, for me, it takes about a half a dozen plays if I want to literally dot every I and cross every T and kind of figure out everything that there is to do in that case. Some people may just kind of want to solve the case in a very general way and may not want to kind of go back and turn over every rock. But if that is something you want to do, I think for the more complicated cases, you're going to get about half a dozen plays in. Now, the first play of any case is probably going to take you about 2 hours. And then if you go back to kind of find the things that you've missed or figured out things that you didn't figure out the first time around, subsequent plays of a case shouldn't take you more than an hour, which means on average, if you've got maybe 2 hours for a case for a first play, and then maybe, let's say on average, 3 more plays at an hour each, it's about 5 hours per case. 5 cases in the box, it's about 25 hours of gameplay. So that's going to be what you can get out of the game. After that, you may want to pass it along to friends, sell it, donate it, maybe to a children's hospital or a library or something like that. But I'd say that for the average person, each game in the series, 1400, 1900, 2400, and Chronicles of Time when it releases, each of those games probably has about 25 hours of gameplay. And for me, I think Lucky Duck is at the point now where they're making this style of game as well as anybody else who's doing it. So if you like games like the Unlock series, Exit the Game, Time Stories, other kind of similar games like Detective, a modern crime board game, or the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective series, I think you're going to really like this. And I think you're going to find that the cases are really well written just in terms of the construction of the mystery, as well as the kind of gameplay design and how you need to interrogate and talk to various people and kind of investigate to get more clues and learn the answers to the case. For me in general, the series probably gets a rating of about 8 to 8.5. It's just not any higher than that because of the disposable nature of the cases and the fact that there is limited replayability and you'll get to a point where you're just kind of done with the game. All right, that leaves us now with Imperium Classics. So this is a fascinating design in my mind. It is essentially a civilization game, and I would put it right up there with, Through the Ages, A Story of Civilization, or the newer version, A New Story of Civilization, in terms of being just a great civilization building game. But it's also an amazing deck builder, and a deck builder that I think is a little bit different than everything else out there. And the reason for that is, well, first of all, you've got asymmetric factions. So anytime you're playing this game, you're going to choose a different deck. In this version of the game, there are 8 different factions. And then there's also Imperium Legends, which has an additional 8 factions. And each different faction, each different deck works differently. It's going to kind of score differently, and it's going to have different sorts of cards in it. and those cards will chain off each other differently. And they'll also incentivize you to be trying to accumulate different kinds of cards, and then those cards will chain off of those cards in different ways. Now, in most deck building games, you're going to be doing something to build up your deck and maybe cycle out bad cards as well. Usually you're buying from some kind of a market. In this game, you will do that. There will be a market, and there are 3 or 4 different kinds of categories of cards that players can buy from that market and sort of buy them in different ways and accumulate them in different ways. However, each player is also going to have a deck of cards specific to their faction, and some of that deck is sort of going to be under lock and key. And each time you kind of cycle through your deck, you'll be able to add a new card into your deck. And then you'll reach a point where you've added in all of a certain type of card into your hand, and you'll be able to switch your deck from being a barbaric nation into a more advanced civilization. And when you do that, you will no longer be able to play a certain type of card with a certain type of icon on it that represents that earlier barbaric tribe. And you will then have access to these civilization cards that have different abilities. Now, once you do that, you will then have access to a second set of cards from your faction. And each time you go through your deck at that point, you'll be able to pay to develop a specific card. And you'll be able to choose each time you do that. So you'll have your choice at that point. You'll be able to look at the cards and say, which card here has the ability that's most useful to me now? And so you'll pay for that card and you'll bring that card into your deck. Now, it is a deck builder, and the mechanics that you're using are kind of very specific to that. So unlike Flotilla, there aren't like 8 different kinds of super variable game mechanics. But within this style of deck building, there are just so many good choices in how you go through your deck, in how you accumulate cards, in how you unlock cards. And the deeper that you get into the game, the more you learn it, the more you're going to learn little tricks that can kind of help you along the way. Sometimes you'll want to get cards out of your hand, and there's ways that you can tuck cards under certain cards in your tableau just to get them temporarily out of your deck and make your deck smaller so that you can cycle through it faster and you can get more upgraded cards into it. Now, this is definitely a game for heavier gamers. Also, obviously, people who like deck building and civilization games. Now, if that kind of trifecta of interest is something that appeals to you, this is a game that you're really going to want to search out and take a look at and play, because the things that it does very, very well, and I think puts it kind of at top in its class. For me right now, this is a game that definitely sits somewhere in that 9 to 10 rating out of 10. So it's a great game. If it's a style of game that appeals to you, it has my full recommend. And if you want to see more of this game and see how it plays, I have done a first impressions video. It's up on the channel right now. It's been out for a couple months, I think. So you can go and check that out and get a closer look at this game and how it plays. But it's great. It's the game of the month for August. And I give it a huge recommend to anyone who would like this type of game. Now, we are in October right now, and this is the August Game of the Month video, which means I'm a little kind of behind. Which means that this video is coming out later than it should. Now, what that means is that in another week and a half or so, I will be premiering my September Game of the Month video, and I already know the 3 games that I'm going to be talking about in that video, and yes, it's going to be 3 games. Much like today, there's going to be 1 game in each category. An older game, a remake, and a newer game. So you can be looking for that in about a week and a half, and then the October Game of the Month video should come out probably in about the first week of November. And from then on, each Game of the Week video should come out in that first week of the month, following the month that it's in reference to. So if you've stuck around for the whole thing, thank you very much. And please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. And there'll be more of these videos. There'll be 2 more of these videos in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So take care, have a great week this week, play lots of great games, and I will see you very soon.